The Australian Financial Review.
Hello.
Hello, it's Lucy King calling from the Financial Review.
Hi, Lucy.
How are you?
Oh, fine, thanks.
Earlier this year, Financial Review journalist Lucy King began talking to a retired widow who was having a very hard time.
Oh, it sounds like you've got a lot going on at the moment.
Oh, God, don't tell me about it. Yeah, it's not the best, but anyway.
She didn't want to be identified, so we'll call her Mary. Lucy had been put in touch with Mary by the police, who'd knocked on her door in April.
I was absolutely blown away. The fraud squad rang me and said that they wanted to come and see me within the hour. It was out of the blue.
But Lucy discovered it wasn't out of the blue. Mary had been monitored for months, as she was one of the country's highest volume users of cryptocurrency ATMs.
Over the course of the year, Mary had fed, note by note, $364,000 into a tiny machine in her local tobacconist. The police wanted to know why.
Welcome to The Fin. I'm Lisa Murray. This week, Lucy King and James Eyers on Australia's boom in crypto ATMs, how they're being used for investment scams, and why the government is struggling to regulate them. It's Thursday, October 30. Hi Lucy, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Lucy, how did you come to be interested in cryptocurrency ATMs?
When I looked into the Australian landscape of cryptocurrency, I realised that crypto ATMs are a very uniquely Australian story. Because although they've been banned in the UK and New Zealand, here in Australia, we have the third highest number.
Mm-hmm.
Crypto ATMs are regulated by AUSTRAC, who are the nation's anti-money laundering regulator. AUSTRAC had just put out the results of an investigation they'd done, saying that 85% of the most prolific users of ATMs were victims of scams, which I thought was a crazy statistic and something I wanted to know more about. So crypto ATMs, I think it's actually a bit of a misnomer. I don't think it's perhaps the best name for the way they work. You would imagine that ATMs dispense cash or dispense money of some form. That's not actually how these machines work. A better title might be automated exchange kiosks. So although theoretically they do buy and sell, the vast majority just let you buy cryptocurrency using cash. So you'd walk up to the machine, you'd feed cash in, you would scan a QR code which tells the machine where to send that cash, and it would be automatically deposited in a cryptocurrency wallet address.
And how many are there in Australia?
Back in 2014, when the first one appeared in Australia, there was just one. And then 6 years later, there was only 20. Between 2020 and now, there's been a huge boom in the number of crypto ATMs. Now we're approaching 2,000. You probably don't realise how many you live near. I had no idea there was 3 on my high street, but once you know they exist, you'll see them in newsagents, convenience stores, post offices, all those familiar local environments.
So who owns and operates these crypto ATMs?
So there's around 8 ATM operators in Australia, half of which are foreign owned. The big 3 players who own about 90% of the market are American and Canadian, and then the smaller operators tend to be Australian. One of the reasons why AUSTRAC did this investigation was because they were trying to investigate the boom. Why are there so many ATMs in Australia and who's using them? And their investigation looked at 3 months' worth of transaction data. AUSTRAC estimated from their investigation that these ATMs handle around 150,000 transactions a year, moving $275 million through them.
So then how did you come to be in touch with Mary?
I sort of immediately set out on finding one of these users of ATMs. Eventually, one of the state police agreed to ask the 15 scam victims that were in their state, and they all said no apart from one, which was Mary. So I eventually got her number and gave her a call.
Oh, well, it's a bit of a long story. This all started in about February 23. And
Mary is 85. She's a widow. She spoke with great eloquence and intelligence, but also she was really hesitant and embarrassed in that first conversation. She immediately assumed that I thought she was an idiot, and she was deeply ashamed that she was a victim and lost all her money. But that's not actually at all the impression she made on me. The impression she made on me was that she was intelligent and had put a lot of thought into the decisions she'd made and was a seasoned investor, but had come under the spell, I guess is the best way of putting it, of a very manipulative person who convinced her that he had her best interests at heart. I think she prioritized telling me the reasoning behind her decisions as opposed to
What actually happened,
you know, and the emotional impact that it's had on her. So she said that back in 2023, post-COVID, she had a good investment portfolio that she was relying on to get her income because she was retired. And she was used to getting about $130,000 in dividends from her stock portfolio each year. But because of the volatility of the market during that time, it had gone down to about a third of that.
And I got extremely concerned about how I was going to live. And so I started looking for alternative investments because the share market was a disaster.
So she was in a space where she thought, I need to start looking for new investments because this current strategy is not working. So one day she saw a video of who she thought was Twiggy Forrest, Andrew Forrest, from Fortescue.
You will be richer than you ever imagined. I'm talking about life-changing money, and you won't believe how incredibly simple it is. You can make money in just 3 minutes.
Talking about an automated software that would allow an arbitrage type of trading that allows you to benefit from the cryptocurrency markets.
And we should say at this point that it wasn't actually Andrew Forrest, it was a deepfake AI-generated Andrew Forrest suggesting that investment.
Yeah, that's right.
Andrew Twiggy Forrest is the latest well-known Aussie being used in an artificial intelligence scam. An 11-minute video...
She took the video on face value. She thought it was Andrew Forrest. Actually, it wasn't the first time Mary had considered investing in cryptocurrency. She'd previously invested in Binance. And so she was intrigued. She thought, actually, perhaps cryptocurrency is the next step for me because the traditional stock market that I've been relying on isn't working for me. So she thought, I will invest in the minimum that they were recommending, which was $250. She invested the minimum because she knew it was a bit of a punt. It was a low-risk investment. So she transferred the money, didn't think much more about it. 6 months later, she got a phone call.
I had a phone call one evening from this charming man
who introduced himself as Luke Franco, being a solicitor from Switzerland.
He's very educated and he just sounded like such a nice person.
And what did Luke Franco say?
Well, so that first phone call, she says that he said he had all her details. He had her name, her address, her date of birth. He sounded very official, very helpful, very eloquent. He said that the initial investment she'd made had gone up considerably. It was now worth 21 Bitcoin.
It is now worth 21 Bitcoin. And I was blown away and I thought, I like the idea of this.
Equated to about $1 million at the time.
Oh, okay.
Although the landscape to transfer that money from Switzerland to Australia was complicated and full of cryptocurrency regulations that she might not understand, he could help her. And in that phone call, he described it as just a couple of administrative steps so that she could get access to this money. To her, it all made sense. So at first, he was just a helpful guide, you know. All you need to do is transfer $4,000 for my legal services and a little admin fee here and there. It was all quite functional at first. Then as the payments continued for various reasons that he gave her, they got into a pattern of friendship.
You know, he really became like a friend and he was concerned about me because
She said he called her every single day for the next 2 years. How often were you speaking?
Oh, every day.
Every day? Wow, gosh.
Yeah.
For how long?
Nearly 2 years. I speak to him more often than I'd speak to anyone else.
Sometimes for 5 minutes, oh, let me help you with that bank transfer. Other times he would riff about his university days and they would talk about the countries they'd both visited. She would talk about how she liked bridge and he would come back a couple of weeks later saying, I've learnt bridge and now we can talk bridge together. There was a constant flow of sharing information and getting to know each other more as people. And she said she would soon describe him as a friend.
So by this time, Mary was transferring greater amounts of money, and it's not surprising that her bank noticed. What did ANZ do?
Yeah, so she'd had the same bank account for about 40 years, and so her first step when she knew she had to transfer money was to transfer it using her bank account. But quite quickly they called her and said that they were concerned about the high amounts and that she was possibly involved in scam activity, which actually for her at that point was just a administrative frustration because she was so completely convinced that this wasn't a scam. She was more annoyed that the bank were putting hurdles in her way to make this transfer. But eventually they said that they were going to close her account.
I was absolutely devastated. I mean, I've been a perfect citizen all my life, and all of a sudden the bank I've been with for over 40 years says, we're closing your account immediately.
She said they gave her until the end of the week and closed it.
I was in shock, and I walked around the house and I would just sob all day. I'd stop and then I'd start again.
And the stress took its toll on her?
Yeah, so about 2 weeks after the bank closed her account, she found herself in an ambulance. She had pneumonia and had had a heart attack recently. When she was in the ambulance, she spoke to Luke, who was very concerned about her welfare, and he kept calling her in the hospital as well.
Gosh.
She said that at that point she had considered him a really good friend.
Oh, when I was in hospital, yes, and he could tell that I could hardly speak. But no, he was very attentive.
Constantly checking in on her.
So she could no longer send him money via bank transfers. So then what happened?
So after ANZ closed her account, she tried some other global finance apps such as Revolut. But they also flagged her payments and froze them. And so she was looking for a new way to transfer the funds. And she said whenever that happened, Luke was incredibly helpful, suggesting how she might get the money out of the country. Luke introduced her to the concept of crypto ATMs. She'd never heard about it before. And his solution at that point was to use crypto ATMs. There were 7 ATMs within 10 kilometres of where she lived.
Yep.
She picked the one on her local high street. She walked in and it was in a tobacconist. And she always used the same ATM operator, a company called CryptoLink. She would withdraw the cash. She said usually it was in $50 notes because that's what she could get out of the bank ATM. And so she'd feed that slowly into the crypto ATM and then scan a QR code that Luke would give her that would be sent directly to him. At some point, I'm not sure when, her brother started telling her that this was a scam. And at another point, her financial advisor actually found a photo of Luke Franco online, except it wasn't Luke Franco, it was another solicitor in Switzerland with the same bio and the same photo, but a different name. And her financial advisor said, this is proof that this is a scam. Luke Franco is not who he's saying he was, but she didn't listen to any of that because her relationship with Luke was so solid. She had absolutely no doubt that he was telling her the truth and that he had her best interests at heart.
I consider myself intelligent.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I really fell for this. Absolutely 150%.
April of this year, 2025, she got a knock on the door. It was 2 fraud officers from the local state police. Between March of this year and the previous March, she had transferred about $350,000 into these ATMs. They didn't actually explain why they wanted to know the information they did, but they wanted to know why she had been using these ATMs and to show them where she'd been sending the money. In an email to me later, trying to explain it, she said, I can barely face the future and all the additional expenses of getting help from every direction. But I was warned, and I guess it's my own fault. Mary had been severely emotionally manipulated and all up had lost about $500,000 and was now, in her own words, broke. But there are much bigger, broader issues at play here that were raised through her story. When I went to see Mary, she'd kept every receipt. So I could see all 41 transactions she'd made in a 12-month period. Because I had the receipts, I could calculate the hidden fees she'd paid to the crypto ATM operator. She'd paid over $50,000 in fees.
We're talking about the role cryptocurrency ATMs played in an investment scam that lost one victim $500,000, her entire life savings. Lucy, when you visited Mary, she'd kept every single receipt, which you were surprised about, but it was a great thing for an investigative reporter to have that documented evidence. What did the receipts show?
Yeah, I was really excited that she'd kept all her documents because, that's really the core of the story, because the mystery of the crypto ATMs was what fees are the operators charging, how much money is running through these machines. All of those things could be found out through the receipt. So I was really excited to see them. So I got to her house, and as she had described to me on the phone, her receipts were incredibly meticulously kept. They were all in a folder. They were in date order. We sat down at her table and went through them methodically. It took about an hour to go through them. There were so many. And each page, she had stapled the ATM receipts, sometimes 5 or 6 to a page. And there were so many pages. I mean, as she turned over another page and I saw another 6 receipts, my journalistic thirst for data was excited, but my emotional heart was so sad because it was the first time I realized just how much had gone through that machine from her savings. It was really devastating, actually, to see. But what was interesting about having the actual receipts there was that crypto ATMs say in their terms of conditions that they will vary their fees and their hidden fees. They won't declare them to the customer. So the only way you can work out the fees is if you have the receipt, you check the exchange rate that they offered Mary on that day, and then you compare it to the market rate that existed on that day. Now, Mary had never done that, which is, I think, what the ATM operators are sort of counting on. But I put the receipts into a spreadsheet and I worked out the fee. So our calculations across the country are that ATM operators tend to impose transaction fees of between 15 and 17%. For Mary, she was charged between 9 and 19%, which added up over the course of a year to $50,000. So an experienced crypto user would tend to use an exchange online, which have much lower fees than these crypto ATMs. You would be charged between 0.1 and 0.6%. And that fits with AUSTRAC's analysis of who is using the crypto ATMs. They skew much older, between 50 and 70 years. So the way that the ATM operators are regulated is that AUSTRAC require every operator to flag any transaction of $10,000 or more. And that was the other interesting thing about looking at these receipts. I could see once I put them into a spreadsheet that of the 41 she'd made in the last 12 months, 19 of them were $10,000 or more. In fact, 2 of them were $20,000. So that was interesting to me because I thought she's been able to continue to use this ATM. And yet, if the regulatory system is working, AUSTRAC would have received a red flag 19 times in the last year about an 85-year-old transferring extremely high amounts very regularly. And 5 times she used these ATMs twice a day. And yet, Mary reported to me that she had never received a call from CryptoLink, the operator. She'd also never received a call from AUSTRAC.
And then, Lucy, this week, AUSTRAC actually did take action. What have they done?
Yes, they fined CryptoLink just over $56,000 for late reporting of large cash transactions and weaknesses in their transaction monitoring program. As part of the enforcement action, they will have to submit to an independent review of whether they are appropriately flagging large transactions and whether it has the right risk assessments in place. And yet, I mean, we've seen from Mary's receipts that CryptoLink made $50,000, roughly the same size as the fine itself, from just Mary alone in the last year. I wonder if it's a large enough deterrent, given the huge volumes of cash that's flowing through these machines.
And this AUSTRAC fine comes after the government flagged expanded powers for the regulator when it comes to crypto ATMs. It was just a few days before your investigation was published in mid-October that the Financial Review found out Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke was about to make the announcement. What is the government doing?
We heard word that the Minister, Tony Burke, was about to do an announcement that related to crypto ATMs. We didn't know anything more than that. So we decided to put the story out.
It is an easy point of entry for some of the worst elements in our country to be able to transfer cash into currency in a way that is harder for us to be able to find.
He gave a speech the next day at the press club.
I'm now having drafted legislation amending the Anti-Money Laundering Counter-Terror Financing Act to give AUSTRAC new powers.
Giving AUSTRAC the power to prohibit or restrict high-risk operators, which would include crypto ATMs.
I want AUSTRAC to be able to look at the threat environment, look as the technology changes, and be able to have rules that
it was specific and yet vague wording. It was intriguing.
We're doing what we need to do in terms of protecting national security without taking away what would otherwise be reasonable opportunities for some people who want to work in particular markets.
Because the AUSTRAC investigation had just shown that 85% of the transactions they studied were scams or money mules. I had just done an investigation showing that 19 of the last 41 transactions from Mary should have resulted in red flags, but even if they had, they didn't result in shutting Mary's account down. So at that point, we were wondering, can crypto ATMs be regulated effectively? And if not, should there just be an outright ban?
But he stopped short of a ban.
He did stop short of a ban. When he was asked at the conference why he wasn't banning them outright, he said that it would result in legal challenge. Brendan Thomas, who's the CEO of AUSTRAC, said crypto ATMs are possibly the highest risk money laundering channel in Australia at the moment, which is a fairly strong phrase, and yet they are still stopping short of banning the machines outright. That seems curious to me. So we had an AFR reporter at the briefing who spoke to Burke and asked if he'd read about Mary's story, and he said he had, and that he'd changed his speech accordingly. His understanding of Mary's story was that the AUSTRAC powers would deal with cases exactly like Mary's. I disagree with that point because I think AUSTRAC's primary remit is to protect the Anti-Money Laundering Act. It's not to provide consumer protection. In Mary's case, the main gaps that I identified that kept her account open and allowed her to continue paying extremely high amounts over a relatively short period of time was because there was no obligation from CryptoLink, the ATM operator, or AUSTRAC to flag a potential scam with the consumer, being Mary. That's the gap that Mary's story really highlighted.
Lucy, I spoke to James Eyers, one of our senior reporters who writes about the financial services sector, to find out how Mary's story fits in with what's happening more broadly across the sector. I started by asking him how big a problem these types of investment scams are.
Look, it's a massive issue. In the first half of this year, so the 6 months to the end of June, Australians reported more than 108,000 scams, leading to losses of about $174 million. Now, that's according to the National Anti-Scam Centre's ScamWatch report, which was released in August. And that probably underestimates the actual numbers because some people are too embarrassed to report them. And now that $174 million number is 26% higher compared to the first half of 2024. Now, of these, just over 14,000, or around 13%, involved losses relating to crypto scams. So annualising that, that's sort of approaching 30,000 a year or 80 every day. Now, the scams come in many forms. There are requests for payments in crypto. There's fake trading platforms out there and fake crypto wallets and Ponzi schemes and all sorts of techniques. And we've found that crypto has become a very popular method of payment for scammers for a couple of main reasons.
Why is that?
Well, the first is anonymity, and the second is this instant clearing of the funds. So just to explain each of those quickly, the crypto transactions, you can see them on the blockchain. You can see sort of these strings of numbers, which are called keys, as the Bitcoin is shifted around this ledger. but it's not connected to an actual person's identity. So the recipient wallet receiving the funds is completely anonymous. So that's obviously very attractive to criminals. Second is this idea of instant transfer. One of the innovations of the blockchain, which is the network over which the crypto moves, is that settlement happens like in minutes, sometimes even seconds. So the money is gone as soon as the person pushes the button, and it can't easily be recovered by the banks or the police. And that contrasts with the traditional banking system, which can sometimes settle overnight, and it gives the banks time to sort of check and block suspicious transactions. We're also seeing this scamming getting much more sophisticated this year. As Lucy reported, the impersonation scams are much more common, and these are using really sophisticated techniques to get people to trust a text or an email. Scammers are going to significant lengths to create the appearance that the request they're making for the money is genuine.
And as you said, the number of scams are clearly going up by quite a big number. So why is Australia being targeted?
Australia is an obvious target for a few reasons. We're a very well-to-do country. There's lots of equity in property, big balances in superannuation, high savings rates in the banks. And we're online a lot. Like a reasonably tech-savvy population, even sort of elderly grandmothers wielding their iPhones and whatnot. Australia's got a big culture of investment in the stock market. You know, share ownership is high. Self-managed super funds are proliferated. Superannuation is a national talking point. Culturally as well, Australians are very trusting people. Some might even say gullible, but the techniques here are used are very clever. And we've seen that outside the crypto area recently when you look at the Shield and First Guardian scandals. There are all these layers of deception that gain the trust that many Australians are willing to give. Look, there are probably a few other reasons as well. Like Australia has a bit of a gambling culture. You know, we love a punt. And our stock market was built off speculative mining companies and whatnot. So I think you sort of find that a lot of people find themselves in a cost of living crisis. And when you combine that in an environment where interest rates are falling, which have been depressing investment returns, many investors are looking to chase capital gains. And they've seen the price of Bitcoin soar. They threw 190,000 Australian dollars a coin last month, and they're really trying to get on that. And I've pointed earlier to those big balances in super funds. The size of the savings pool in Australia really does make it a magnet to hackers. Superannuation is a $4 trillion plus sector. It's one of the world's biggest pools of savings. And obviously that's put us on the radar of criminals from overseas.
So Lucy, a final question. Do you think stories like Mary's can make a meaningful difference? What can be done to regulate crypto ATMs more appropriately to stop this sort of thing happening again?
So I think this story is interesting because you can actually see regulatory protections working in many instances here. You can see that the banks issued the warnings to Mary. She is a, individual human who can make her own decisions, decided to ignore them because the emotional relationship she had with Luke was so incredibly strong. When she got to crypto ATMs, which was where she lost the vast majority of her money, those warnings didn't exist, and they should have done. There's a sort of gap within a gap with crypto ATMs. Scammers are very adept at spotting those gaps and filling them. Scammers have identified that crypto ATMs are the route for huge sums of money in this country at the moment, and they're going to continue to use that route until they're stopped.
And Lucy, what happened to Luke?
Yeah, so I asked Mary whether she was still in contact with Luke, and she said that he still calls sporadically. She wrote me an email saying that she has nothing to lose now, so she keeps on talking to him. She says, "I'm sure he's quite fond of me," which suggests that the emotional connection that they shared is still not quite evaporated, which was so surprising to me because in the same email she said that she can barely face the future and that he has ruined her.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Lucy.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to The Fin. I'm Lisa Murray, with Financial Review journalist Lucy King and senior reporter James Eyers joining the podcast today. The Fin is produced by Alex Gow and Mandy Coulin. Fiona Buffini is head of premium content. Our theme is by Alex Gow. If you like the show and want to hear more, follow us wherever you get your podcasts and consider rating and reviewing us as it helps others find us. For more stories about markets, business and power, subscribe to The Financial Review at afr.com/subscribe. See you next week.
The Australian Financial Review.